Welcome to How to Cook That. I'm Ann Reardon, and today we're making a feast from 200 years ago. In this very old cookbook, there are some pages that show you what to serve for what it calls grand and splendid entertainment in 2 courses. Each of these courses has a great many dishes, the recipes for which are included in the cookbook. Let me make them all and see what unusual things they served and how long it takes one person to prepare just the second course of this feast. Let's start with what it calls floating island. Take a quart of the thickest cream you can get and make it pretty sweet with fine sugar. Pour in a gill of sack, grate the yellow rind of a lemon and mill the cream till it's of a thick froth. Then carefully pour in the thin from the froth into a dish. Now mine is all just thick. I've just whipped the cream, so I'm just going to spread a thin layer on the bottom. Then it says cut a French roll, or as many as you want, as thin as you can, and put a layer of it as light as possible on the cream. Then add a layer of currant jelly, and then a very thin layer of roll, and then hartshorn jelly. Now, according to the book, the currant jelly was indeed a currant jam, but hartshorn jelly was made using deer antlers. Now, I don't have access to that, so I'm just going to use a few different jams here. Over that, whip your froth which you saved off your cream well milled up and lay it on top as high as you can heap it. That's floating island done. Let's see what everybody thinks of it.
I liked the floating island, and it seems like a dessert that you could serve today and nobody would recognise that it was from 200 years ago.
Next is blancmange. This recipe used isinglass to make it set, which if you remember from a previous episode is made from boiling the air bladders of bony fish. To save time, I'm going to use gelatin instead because we have a lot of dishes to make today. For flavour, it uses 4 ounces of almonds and a spoonful of French brandy. Then it says to set it over a stove fire and let it remain until it's almost ready to boil. Then add the juice of some spinach to make it green. At this point, we're supposed to strain out the almonds. My concern is it doesn't look white like blancmange, so I'm wondering if they left out a step to grind up the almonds. I'm going to give it a quick blend, and that definitely will make it look whiter. Then it says to strain it through a gauze sieve, and when it grows thick, put it into a mould. Let it lie until the next day and then turn it out.
Blancmange.
It's just water-flavoured jelly.
I don't like it.
Next is the dish of snow. This recipe starts by boiling 12 large apples, removing the skins and pushing the pulp through a sieve. So we basically have pureed apple. And then it says to beat the whites of 12 eggs to a very strong froth. Beat and sift half a pound of double refined sugar and strew it into the eggs. Work up the pulp of your apples to a strong froth. Now, I'm not sure if the apples were supposed to be cold or hot for this step. I'm going with really hot so that we can cook the egg whites. Then it says to beat them together until they're like a stiff snow, and lay it upon a china dish and heap it up as high as you can. Now, this doesn't look stiff to me. I'd love to speak to the original cookbook author and ask, is this right? It definitely couldn't make a snowball if you wanted to. I'm guessing that perhaps our apples are much bigger now, so I should have used less apples or much smaller apples.
It's like frothy apple puree.
It's just apple puree and egg white.
It was really weird.
Moving on to almond cakes. Take 2 ounces of bitter and 1 pound of sweet almonds, blanched and beat. Half a pound of sifted loaf sugar, 8 yolks and 4 whites of eggs, the juice of half a lemon and the rind grated, and a little rose and orange flower water. Mix the whole well together. Either bake it in one large pan or several smaller ones. If this tastes nice, then we've got a nice gluten-free cake recipe here. I guess you could take out the rose and orange flower water and add different flavouring of your choice.
Quite a modern taste, I think. I'm surprised it's an old recipe.
It was nice, but it tastes of hotel air freshener.
Nice flavour, not too sweet.
On the other side of the table, we have raspberry puffs. There is actually no recipe in the book for raspberry puffs, but there is one for lemon puffs. So I'm going to follow the directions for that one, but swap out the lemons for raspberries because they're both quite acidic. It says to beat this for half an hour. Boy, am I grateful to have electricity and an electric mixer. It turns out like this, thick but still a little runny. Next it says to put to it 3 eggs and mix it well up. I think adding the whole eggs to this is going to make it really runny, but I am curious to see how they bake. Then it says throw sugar on your papers, drop the puffs in small drops and bake them in a slack oven, which we would call a slow oven or a low temperature oven. They do puff up in the oven, but when it said small drops, I think they meant really small. There was so much of this mixture that I made a tray of tiny ones as well, and when they're done, the bigger ones look like this, slightly browned, and they have lost that strong raspberry flavour. But the smaller ones look like this, the nice bright pink crispy little drops.
These make me smile.
They're like crunchy raspberries and I really liked them.
Little meringue. Very raspberry.
Over here we have custards. There are lots of recipes for custards in this book, including beast custard, that says set a pint of beast over the fire. Beast is the colostrum or first milk of a cow after it's given birth. I think that we'll leave that for the cute little calves and make the baked custard recipe instead. It says boil a pint of cream with some cinnamon and mace. Now mace, you may remember, is the covering that's around the outside of the nutmeg seeds. It tastes like nutmeg, but it doesn't have that bitterness that nutmeg has. Put those in the cream, heat it, and then leave it to cool so those flavours can infuse. It also says to add sugar to your palate, so I'm going to stir that in now while it's hot. When it's cold, take a little sack and orange flower water. Oops, that was a bit much. Orange flower water is a bit strong. And 4 yolks and 2 whites of eggs and mix them well together. And add nutmeg and bake it in cups.
It's very velvety. Quite a nice flavour, not super sweet. Yeah, pretty good.
Now for tartlets. This was an unusual recipe. It involves rubbing the oranges with salt on the outside and then soaking them in that salty water overnight, then swapping it out for fresh water every day for 2 weeks. Then it said to boil them whole. This made the flesh of the orange really bitter. Combine that with the rind and it was inedible. So I ended up peeling them and just chopping up the flesh because I didn't want it all to go in the bin. This was then combined with some stewed apples, sugar and orange juice and then spooned into pastry cases. Then it says before you put your tarts in the oven, take a feather and rub them over with melted butter and sift some double refined sugar over them. Obviously my feather is not stiff enough for this job. Apparently this will form a pretty icing and make them have a pleasing effect on the eye.
I really liked the tartlets. They weren't too sweet, so it felt like you could probably eat a lot of them.
Oh, that's very strong. It's like a little bit of pastry with a massive scoop of marmalade on top.
Now for pears compote. Let what quantity of pears you wish to be nicely scalded till soft. Then take them out, pare them and throw them into cold water to harden. Take some cloves, cinnamon, sugar and red wine and put your pears into it. Let them gently boil until syrupy. This dish has definitely survived 200 years because I've seen this on restaurant menus nowadays.
It just tastes like a pear, just a little bit sweeter.
Actually, it's pretty good. I don't mind it.
The next plate is Moonshine, which, no, it is not high-proof alcohol, but rather quite a creative dish. It's made by making a sweet, clear jelly. They used calves' feet to make their gelatin. I'm using modern gelatin because to our palate, calves' feet jelly tastes like having beef stock in your dessert. Now you put some of the clear jelly to one side, and with the rest of it you add in some chocolate, some blanched almonds, and some cream. They pound it in a mortar and pestle, but I can use a blender for that because I've got the modern kitchen, and then we need to strain it. Then it says lay tin in the shape of a half moon in the middle and stars around it. Lay little weights on the tins to keep them in place where you put them. Then pour the moonshine into the dish. If you need to know how to make your own shapes, your own little cookie cutters, I explained that in the Twitter dessert video that was from quite some time ago. And when it's quite cold, take out the tins, then fill up your vacancies with the clear calf's foot jelly and garnish with sweetmeats. According to the book, sweetmeats were candied lemon peel, and this dessert looks a lot more creative than I was expecting for 200 years ago.
It's a strong chocolate mousse. I like it.
It was really nice.
There was little sweets on top that were meant to be stars, but they tasted horrible.
Next we have fruit in jelly. It says to take some clear calf's feet jelly. I'm of course using normal gelatin, but there's no sweetener or flavour in the recipe at all. So to give it a chance of being eaten, I'm going to add some sugar and then let's put in the juice of a lemon and an orange. It's not much, so it certainly won't be a strong flavour. It says to put in half a pint of jelly, and when it's set and stiff, lay 3 fine peaches and a bunch of grapes with the stalk upwards. Put over them a few vine leaves and then fill up your bowl with jelly. Let it stand until the next day. Turn your jelly carefully out and serve it to the table.
It just has grapes, a whole thing of grapes in there.
The fruit is nice, but the jelly seems superfluous.
When I read apple pie, I thought, great, a normal apple pie recipe, I know how to do that, but of course it was not. So we started out how you'd expect, peel and quarter and core some apples and put them into pastry, and then they've put a little bit of sugar and some lemon juice and some cloves over it. But then it says to boil the parings of the apples and the cores in some water with a blade of mace till the flavour is extracted. Strain it, put to it a little sugar and boil it until it's reduced to a small quantity, then pour it into your pie. Put your crust on and send it to the oven. And if you're thinking that's not that unusual, the recipe continues. When the pie comes from the oven, beat up the yolks of 2 eggs with half a pint of cream and a little nutmeg and sugar. Put it over a slow fire and keep stirring it till it's nearly boiling. Then take off the lid of the pie and pour it in. Cut the crust into small pieces with 3 corners and stick them about the pie. Personally, I prefer the look of an apple pie with a lid on and the custard in a jug to the side, but each to their own.
I love apple pie normally, but this one not so much. It was a bit stodgy, I thought.
But not as good as one that Mum would make nowadays.
The next dish is marmalade. I'll put all the details of all these recipes on the How to Cook That website for you in case you actually want to try them or make your own 200-year-old feast. This one turned out just like you'd expect marmalade should, so if you're throwing a 200-year-old dinner party, I'd suggest just buy the orange marmalade instead of making it.
Paddington Bear and I love marmalade.
I wasn't sure what to put the marmalade with.
Strangely, they served sweet and savoury dishes together in the same course. So now we're making potted lobster, which is basically boiled lobster mashed with mace, nutmeg, pepper, salt and a little butter. That's then pushed down into a jar and topped with clarified butter. Think of this butter layer as like putting plastic wrap over the contents to help it last longer. Remember, there was no plastic and no fridges back then.
The potted lobster was a bit weird on its own, but I feel like it'd be really yum on crackers or like a little roll.
The next dish is potted char, which is preserved in the same way. They sprinkle the fish with salt, then pepper, and some ground mace. They used mace a lot in these recipes. Then, once it had been baked, it says to lay it in pots and cover in clarified butter. This would have been prepared the day before it was needed and stored in the larder.
The potted salmon kind of just tasted like a normal salmon, just mashed into a pot.
Moving on to the other common method for storing cooked meat at the time, which was covering it in jelly. Some of the recipes prepare a savoury flavoured jelly, and others use a lot of vinegar to acidify it. Think of pouring jelly over the meat as the equivalent to vacuum sealing it today. You're aiming to eliminate all the air, which, as we now know, inhibits the growth of any bacteria that needs oxygen to spread, so the food would last longer. This storage method is rarely used now since the invention of plastic and refrigeration. But for this banquet they put snipes in savoury jelly. I used quail because I couldn't get snipes, and crawfish or crayfish in savoury jelly.
The quail in jelly was really good. The acidity of the jelly actually went really well with the quail.
There was lots of bones, which is really weird in jelly.
Crawfish tasted like a big prawn with like some of that tree bark bitterness.
Next on the menu is marbled veal, for which they take a cow tongue. Oh, this is not something that I have ever cooked before and probably won't ever cook again. It says to boil it for 3 hours, then skin it and chop it very fine with a pound of butter until it's like a paste. Have ready some veal stewed and beat in the same manner. Then put some veal in potting pots. Thin some tongue in lumps over the veal. Do not lay your tongue in any form, but let it be in lumps, and it will then cut like marble. Fill your pot close up with veal and press it very hard down. When you send it to the table, cut it into thin slices.
I thought it was like chocolate mousse, so I had a massive bite, and it tasted like I imagined Molly's dog food would.
The marbled veal was gross. It was just bad. Maybe spreading it on toast would make it better, but I wouldn't risk it.
All of those dishes needed to be prepared ahead because on the day of the party you still need to boil pork with vinegar, herbs and spices. They stored it in this cooking liquid after they'd sliced some for use. Again, the vinegar and the acidity of that is going to help, and having it in the liquid is going to help get rid of some of the oxygen. Then you also need to truss 2 chickens, douse them in flour, baste them with butter and roast them by the fire. Do the same thing with 2 ducks. And also you need to roast a rib of lamb. And then put all of that on the table and you have your second course ready. Even using a modern kitchen, that took me 3 days to make all these dishes, and that doesn't include the time it took to collate the shopping list and source all the ingredients. You'll need a lot of servants if you want to eat like this regularly, and you'd want to make sure none of your guests were vegan.
The whole thing looked fancy, but it was kind of odd how they have the desserts and the meats and it all right there instead of spreading them out.
If we were having 24 people over for dinner, we'd probably feed them
24 pizzas.
And crumbed fish and chips, of course.
Even if it was Christmas, we wouldn't have that many types of meat. We'd probably have just like maybe some pork and some turkey and then lots of salads.
With thanks to my amazing patrons for your support that allows me to make these sorts of videos. You can click on the link and see the different rewards for patrons there. Make it a great week and I'll see you on Friday.